this is John Petrucci, and I'm very excited to tell you about my brand new signature amp with Mesa Boogie. It's called the JP-2C. I've been playing Mesa Boogie amplifiers for almost 30 years now, and as most of you may know, I'm a huge fan of the Mark II-C Plus. In fact, you can hear it on almost every Dream Theater album and my solo album, one of my favorite Boogie amps of all time. So it's been a dream of mine to one day have a signature amp with Mesa Boogie, not only that, but a signature C Plus. And now that dream actually came true, and we have the JP-2C. So the thing about the original 2C Plus that I loved was how it sounded, how amazing the tone was, and all the different things I can get out of it. With that, it had its limitations as far as performance, because it really was only a 2-channel amp that shared the same input volume for your clean and your crunch, and it also shared the same EQ. So when the idea came to do a signature C+, what I thought of was, how would I make this more performance ready? What were some features that we can add to try to make it so that the amp was going to deliver what I needed in any circumstance, but at the same time be a real 2C+. So we have the best of both worlds. This amp is actually a reissue, certified, bona fide 2C+. Everything from the circuit board, transformer, it's the real deal, and it sounds unbelievable. But what we did is we made it more flexible. So we have 2 EQs that you could assign to any channel, so you have a lot of freedom right there. And we have 2 distinct and separate crunch or lead sounds. So you could make them 2 lead sounds, you can make them 2 crunch sounds, and you have total control over the amount of gain and the type of EQ that you set on each channel. Also, we made the amp have MIDI, so as far as integrating into any sort of MIDI foot switching rig, it's perfect, it's seamless, and the amp also has a direct cab clone out. So it has all these incredible features that make it the new modern day 2C+. That's just going to blow your minds as soon as you plug in. Now, as you can probably tell just by looking at this amp, it's highly capable of delivering a wide range of sounds and tones for any guitar player. But for me, what I was looking for and what my requirements are really basically comes down to 3 sounds. So the first sound that I look for is a clean sound, and I go for a beautiful, clear, crystally clean sound that has maximum headroom. The notes won't break up, the clarity is there, the fullness is there, and the musicality is there, and that is found in channel 1. So as far as dialing in my clean sound, what I usually tend to do, first of all, is I don't use the graphic EQ. So you have a selection here, could be done through MIDI as well. You can use either EQs, but I have it off. So all of the tone setting is going to be coming from the way that you dial in the tone controls. And as you can see from here, usually I kind of try to emulate a scooped type of sound without using the EQ. So the bass and treble are up, the mid is dropped, the presence is up. So that presence is going to give you a nice chimey high end that's really beautiful. Taking out the mids is going to make it a little softer, and having the bass and treble up is going to make it full. Also, as far as gain, again, I'm trying to get the cleanest sound as possible, so I don't have the gain very high. It's set, somewhere below 12 o'clock. And that is the approach that I take for my clean sounds. It's a beautiful sound. Of course, there are many other things you can do with it if you experiment, but to me, that's a great clean sound. Now channel 2 and 3 are essentially the same, and that's what I was looking for again with this amp. So instead of having to have two separate preamps or two separate heads or whatever, and you're switching back and forth, this amp actually has two pretty much identical lead crunch heavy sounds. I tend to use channel 2 for my crunch sounds just because it goes in order. You don't have to do it this way, but clean crunch lead. But you can use channel 2 as a lead sound, channel 3 as a crunch sound, and vice versa. Also, there's an assignable switch here where you can pick which EQ you use. So for this one, I have it so that I'm on channel 2 and I'm using EQ number 1. Now, the beautiful thing about this being an authentic 2C Plus is that these controls respond exactly the way a C Plus would. And that's really important for me because I've been using those amps forever and I'm very used to the feel of the pots and what they do and how that influences the sound. So for me, for a crunch sound, I look for something that's really tight and aggressive. You'll notice that the gain is pretty high. And when you set the gain that high, you need to, with most boogies, roll the bass down very low. You know, you can even go below here. And what that will do is that'll tighten up your low end. You can make up for that low end by boosting it in the EQ, so it's not a problem. There's usually a sweet spot with the treble that's somewhere in that 1 o'clock zone, 12 to 1 to 130. Mids, I pull out a little bit, but not too much because, as you notice with the EQ, I'm going to pull it out there. And so if you make it so it's too scooped, it kind of disappears in the mix. So the mid is going to give you some more musicality. And then another thing that we did with this amp that is on both channels, and this is really, really cool. This is one of my favorite things. We did two things. As far as the gain control is concerned, there is a preset level of the input gain. On the old boogies, you used to be able to set that yourself. Now there's kind of like a magic spot that some people like. Some people like it one way, some people like it another way. It is set to the magical spot on the gain control, and it's very musical. It has a great sound. If you want a little bit more, which for me, sometimes when I'm playing leads, things like that, I want just a little bit more gain, you can pull this control. So you have the option of the original setting or slightly more gain. And it's not the type of thing where it's a boost. It's not a volume boost. It's a very subtle thing where if you were dialing in the original amp, maybe when it's pushed in, it might be 7.5 or 3/4 or something like that. You know, all the pots are slightly different. And then when you pull it out, maybe it's up to like 8 or 9. So that's the difference. You're going to get slightly more gain. I love that feature. It's awesome. Both channel 2 and 3 have that. So you can mix and match. You can have channel 2 pushed in, channel 3 pulled out. It's incredible. Along the same lines, the presence control has a pull pot as well. So what we did here is that when you have the pot pulled, it behaves like a C plus presence control. You'll notice the same thing like on a C plus or a Mark IV, where you actually, there's a lot of sizzle with that control. It's a very powerful control, so you have to kind of run it very low. Like on C pluses, you might run it between 3 and 4, not really higher than that. So if you pull this, you get the classic C plus presence control. And for me, I like to use that on crunch sounds because it's very aggressive and in your face. Both channels, again, have that feature. If you push that in, it actually has a little bit more mellow or revoiced presence range where you can actually, as you can see on channel 3, you can crank it up past 12, 1 o'clock, and it's still really musical. And it just kind of gives the sound this great upper end that's not searing and that's more appropriate for playing single note passages that are on the higher part of the guitar. So let me give you an example of channel 2 set as a tight, aggressive crunch sound using EQ number 1, and this is with the presence pulled and the gain pushed. Check it out. So channel 3, like I said before, is pretty much the same as channel 2, but what we did is we did increase the gain. So yes, there's even more gain on channel 3. And so again, with that preset input gain setting, it's set to a bit above 8, something like 8 3/4, and then if you have it pulled, then it's like 9, in the 9 zone. So it's almost maxed out. So channel 3 should sound very much the same as channel 2, but more gain. So in this instance, I'm using channel 3, and I have the second EQ selected. And I like the different color LED here. Watch when I switch. That's EQ1, EQ2, 2 different colors. So the way that I use channel 3 as compared to channel 2 is a great example of being able to mix and match the gain and presence settings. Channel 3 I have set for a lead sound. So I have the gain pulled and maxed out. So that's going to be the most gain that the amp has to deliver. It's going to give you a lot of sustain and a very comfortable and liquidy feel. As far as the presence, when playing leads up higher on the neck, I don't want those notes to be too searing, right? I want them to have more musicality, so I use the pushed presence setting, and I'm able to turn that up. In this case, it's almost at 2 o'clock. It's between 1 and 2 o'clock, so there's a lot of usable range with that control. As far as the settings that I use for lead sound, besides the gain and presence being different, the other controls are pretty much in the same ballpark. I might back the treble down a little bit just to make the notes a bit fatter and to bring out some of the low end. Sometimes a cool thing to do is I'll actually bring up the bass and then bring down the mids. But when you do that type of thing, you have to use less gain. But it's a cool way to approach a lead sound because you get a really nice and fat sound. As far as the EQ, I'm using the second EQ, and it's not very different from the way that I have my crunch EQ set, but what I'll do for leads is I'll give a little bit of a boost at 750 just so that the lead sound cuts through a little bit more. I'll take down the highs a little bit to make it smoother on the top, and if need be, depends on how much gain you use, I'll take down the 80 Hertz slider as well. So that is my EQ setting and my channel settings. So let me show you what channel 3 sounds like. Now, if all of that wasn't enough, this amp actually has one more secret ingredient. It's something that I'm really psyched about, and it's a feature that we call Shred. You can access it on the front panel via this mini toggle or via MIDI, and it's assignable to both channels 2 and 3. Now, what Shred does is it adds increased gain to the upper mids and higher harmonics, which helps to add clarity tightness and aggression to heavy riffs, especially when you're playing those riffs on detuned guitars, 7-string guitars, 8-string, and extended range guitars. So that covers the front panel features. Now let me tell you about some of the rear panel features. The JP-2C has independent reverb controls for each channel. It has a fully buffered effects loop, a built-in cab clone, and most importantly, it's the first Mesa head to have full MIDI capability. So there you have it, the JP-2C. This amp was 30 years in the making. It's a dream come true for me, and I really can't wait for all of you to check it out.